Hey, what's going on everyone? Nick here with my spoiler-free review for Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So obviously, since the film has not been released and there is a ton of spoilery details within the film, this is going to be a spoiler-free review as best I can, with a spoiler review and discussion probably coming this weekend as it gets released around the world. So I'm going to give my general thoughts on the story, the returning characters, new characters, how certain elements were handled, my thoughts kind of going in and generally about this Disney Star Wars trilogy, and other things within the film. So generally, my thoughts on this Disney trilogy so far, I found The Force Awakens to be a generally safe but fun reboot of A New Hope, introducing some new characters, setting up tons of mysteries that would likely get revealed within subsequent films. Now, as for The Last Jedi, I feel like that movie has been talked to death about how it ruined Star Wars and, changed everything that JJ had set up and everything, and I pretty much agree with that camp and all those discussions about the film. Was not a fan of it in the slightest. But as for this movie, I surprisingly walked out of it very pleased. Which is kind of crazy because thus far, the Disney movies in general just haven't really wowed me. I think Rogue One is fine and Solo was just kind of boring and safe and not really interesting or exciting, but this movie legitimately had me engaged and emotionally invested within the story. And it's probably my favorite of the Disney Star Wars movies, and Disney in general Star Wars produced material besides The Mandalorian. I really liked how they explored the new characters of Rey, Finn, and Poe in this movie, although Finn probably gets the shortest end of the stick among the main three characters. We also get some more exploration of Kylo Ren after he's been made the Supreme Leader after the events of The Last Jedi. Besides them, we also get the return of Lando Calrissian, which was a welcome return because Billy D. Williams does not miss a single beat. He feels exactly like Lando where we saw him in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It's kind of crazy what he can do as Lando still all these years later. In terms of new characters, this movie introduces Zori Bliss, the bounty hunter played by Kerry Russell, a new First Order officer named General Pryde, who actually served under the Emperor during the events of Return of the Jedi, a new character named Jana, played by Naomi Ackie, and a droid named Dio. The general plot for this film is basically that Palpatine is back, and the Republic forces are trying to find him to stop this new Sith armada that he's calling the Final Order from being unleashed on the galaxy. At the same time, Kylo is actually trying to find the Emperor for his own means, because he doesn't want anyone to impede upon his order and rule over the galaxy. So, like I mentioned earlier, I really did like Rey, Kylo, and Poe the most in this movie. I feel like Poe Dameron finally feels like an actual character and is given a lot of depth and interesting moments throughout the film. I also appreciated how Leia was handled after the tragic passing of Carrie Fisher. When Carrie passed and they had the Herculean task of continuing on with her legacy after her character was not killed off in The Last Jedi, Abrams had promised that they would not digitally recreate Carrie Fisher and that they would use pre-existing footage that was shot for The Force Awakens and retroactively work it into this new movie. And all of her scenes fit together very well. It's actually kind of crazy how they were able to use that footage and salvage it for this film, and I guess just shoot the actors against a green screen and make it all work together. In terms of the new characters, I did like Zori Bliss. I think that she was kind of interesting. I definitely love to learn more about her. The other characters like Jana and General Pryde, they don't get too much to shine, so I can't really say too much on them. They're fine, but nothing to write home about. And the droid Dio that they've been promoting for a while is kind of serviceable at best as well. I even would take BB-8 over him. Now, the big question that a lot of people probably have is how was Palpatine and the whole Sith fleet and the Final Order that he has handled, because in the trailers we can see this giant armada of Sith Star Destroyers that have been hiding out on this planet called Exegol, alongside the Sith Troopers, which are decked out in red armor. Now, as for Palpatine, I thought he was handled fine. He's not in the movie too much, but for what he's given, I think Ian McDiarmid did a fine job, and he felt like the Palpatine that we had in the other movies. And I don't think he was forced in or felt out of place. He really fit the story and what it was going for. But I don't want to give too much more away about how Palpatine was handled, because that is delving into spoiler territory. If you guys have been keeping up with the promotional material, we also have the return of the Knights of Ren in this movie, and sadly they are kind of underutilized yet again. We don't really know too much about them or who they are, but they do get a couple cool scenes which I guess made up for it. Now, as for my problems with the film, even though I really enjoyed it, it's definitely my favorite of the Disney movies, it's not perfect by any stretch of the means. It definitely has a pacing problem. I feel like at times there's too much exposition and too many, objects and MacGuffins introduced in the film, and at points I was actually thinking that this could have easily been split into 2 movies, although I don't really know how they would have pulled that off. Finales are pretty hard to pull off, and making a movie like this that had to have answered tons of questions from The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, while also telling a compelling story to end this trilogy, but also the entire 9-film saga, was going to be an impossible task from the get-go. Speaking of questions answered, this movie definitely answers tons of questions from The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Although, without spoiling things, there are a couple big things that go unanswered, which I'm sure everyone will be talking about. One thing that I've seen a lot of people bring up thus far is the fan service and callbacks in this movie. Now, since this is the end of everything with the Skywalker Saga, obviously there is going to be, fan service moments and callbacks to previous films and characters, and honestly I thought most of it was handled organically. Maybe a couple small things here and there might have felt out of place, but honestly, being a big Star Wars fan, I loved it nonetheless. So, my final thoughts and recommendations on this film. Should you see it? Should you not see it? Personally, I think you should check it out if you liked The Force Awakens enough that you were interested to see where the films are going to go next and where these characters were going to go, and you didn't like what happened in The Last Jedi. Because I personally feel like this movie did a good job of balancing what happened in episodes 7 and 8, while also telling a new story and wrapping up this trilogy. Like I said, as someone who's been pretty harsh and critical of Disney Star Wars thus far, getting a movie this good and, having plot points that were this satisfying is honestly pretty hard to believe. But somehow J.J. Abrams pulled this out of the bag, and I have to salute him for that. So let me know in the comments section down below if you guys got a chance to check out The Rise of Skywalker. What'd you think of it? Let's try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, obviously until everyone has been able to see it this upcoming weekend. Like I mentioned, we'll definitely have some more spoiler videos and spoiler discussion topics, breaking down aspects of the movie and going over our thoughts here on the channel over the coming days and through the weekend, so stay tuned for that. But for all things Star Wars and the latest in pop culture, be sure to subscribe to HN Entertainment.